Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Welcome to church. We're doing a series called 7 Things I Wish Jesus Never Said. We're in the part of the gospel where Jesus is talking about the danger of good things. Now, you'd think a good thing was always a good thing, and usually it is always a good thing. But according to Jesus, if you do a good thing in the wrong way, it can turn into a bad thing. And the good thing that Jesus is talking about this morning is praying. What could possibly be wrong with that? When you come to church, you would expect to hear prayers being prayed. You would expect to hear prayer spoken of in a positive way. You would expect to hear someone like me say something like, here's a list of how praying can make your life better. You'd expect all that. But according to Jesus, praying is sometimes bad for you. According to Jesus, people who say their prayers and who are really good at saying their prayers aren't necessarily good people. Sometimes they're idiots and they're nasty, and you need to know why. Okay, this is different. Good. Okay, in Matthew chapter 6, verse 5, Jesus says to his friends, when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand praying in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. So last Sunday I reminded you that the word hypocrite is a first century Greek word for actor. And I further reminded you, pointed out, I suppose, that the business of an actor is to put on a show for the benefit of a watching audience. So what Jesus is talking about here then is saying your prayers or doing your spirituality or whatever in such a way that people notice what you're doing. And what I said about that last Sunday was that when you put on a show for others, what you're really doing is trying to meet some deep need in your own life, trying to heal some deep wound that you've been carrying around forever. So just as an actor needs to hear the clapping of an audience, so too you need people to think well of you. You need people to approve of you. You need people to look at you and think, well, there's a spiritual person. There's a person who says their prayers and reads their Bible. And you have that need because of some deep sickness in you that's never really been healed. Last Sunday we reminded ourselves of the beautiful affirmation with which Jesus' sermon begins. God is already on your side. Blessed are you in your loserness. Blessed are you in your can't get it togetherness. Blessed are you when it all falls apart. Blessed are you when it doesn't work. And when you come to the end of your abilities and capacities and self-control, when it all falls apart, already right there, God is with you. He's on your side. You're blessed in that situation. And the unhealed wound that we often have in our practice of religion is going through the short years of our life, searching for people to approve of us, searching for people to say, you know what, you do measure up. You are good enough. You are worth something. And so you need people to think well of you, because without that affirmation, you're nothing. That is the insecurity of the practice of religion. And being known as a quote-unquote spiritual person really feeds it. It really works. And so the point that Jesus is making then is that if you say your prayers so that people will notice you saying your prayers, if you be spiritual so that people will notice that you are spiritual, and then they do notice, then you got what you wanted and you've nothing left to get. And when I read this sentence here about people who love to pray, what really hits home for me is that sin and nastiness, they follow us into the most spiritual corners of our lives. Clearly, this sin thing, whatever it is, isn't just with us when we're snorting a line of coke in a club or trolling through pornography in our basement. It follows us to the gates of heaven itself, and maybe even into heaven itself. If I were to give you a lecture on the history of sin, that lecture wouldn't begin in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. It would begin earlier than that with Satan in heaven. The view of the church on this matter is that behind sin stands Satan, and the chief characteristic of Satan is that he's obsessed with himself. One of the recurring ideas in Christian demonology is that the devils, whatever they are, can't bear to be mocked, because they take themselves very seriously indeed. And for Jesus, this self-obsession is extremely present when we're religious. When we're trying to do things like read our Bibles and say our prayers, very easily that good thing becomes a self-obsession. A thing that we use to persuade ourselves that we are good people, that we are good enough, that we do measure up, that maybe God should like us after all. And so Jesus speaks thus far negatively about prayer. He seems to have almost no time for it. And so he says, don't be like that. Don't be one of those people who rams their spirituality down everyone's throat and wears their religion on their sleeve. No one wants to know about your prayers. No one wants to know. Keep it to yourself. Instead, look at what he says. Go into your room, close the door, pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father... Why do we have to use the word Father 2 times in one sentence on Mother's Day? Maybe we'll find out. Who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So what Jesus is saying here is that the God who is hidden and invisible should be followed in a way that is private and not public. Which of course means that the best prayer that you know will give you every impression of being completely disinterested in praying. It also means that the best prayer that you know, the worst prayer that you know, gives every impression of being very good at saying their prayers and very accomplished in the practice of religion. Black is white with Jesus, white is black. Then in verse 7 he changes the subject slightly. He says, and when you pray, don't keep going on about it. Don't keep babbling like the pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. The phrase many words that Jesus uses there is a single Greek word, philologia, that rhymes with diarrhea. I'm just saying. And in the ancient world, people's view on prayer was that more is better. Right? More is always more. For example, have a look at this. This is the Egyptian hymn to Amun-Ra. It's a very early example of prayer. And this is the sort of pagan thing that Jesus was referring to. Let's read the opening line. Hail to thee, Amun-Ra, Lord of the thrones of the earth, the oldest existence, ancient of heaven, support of all things, chief of the gods, Lord of truth, Father of the gods, maker of men and beasts and herbs, of all things above, of all things below, deliverer of the suffering and oppressed, judger of the poor, Lord of wisdom, Lord of mercy, most loving, opener of every eye, source of joy. And it goes on like that for ages. I had to study it when I was 22 at university, when I should have been out having fun. By the way, Did you get the bit about the herbs? You got that bit? It doesn't mean that.
Come on,
It does.
Did you notice? The herbs.
Yep.
The herbs. So here's the issue when I'm praying to Amun-Ra. How do I know when I've said enough to get his attention? How do I know when I've listed the correct number of titles that he'll then sit up from his Egyptian throne and listen to what I'm saying? I mean, I mentioned that he's the chief of the gods. That's pretty good. But in case that's not enough, I better also mention that he's the father of the gods. And in case that's not enough, I better mention that he's the support of all things. That might not be enough either, so I better mention that he's the maker of men and beasts. And in case all that isn't enough, I better also mention the fact that he makes herbs. I mean, when you mentioned the crushed cardamom, is that the point when Amun-Ra finally sits up and says, oh, you talking to me? I thought you were talking to someone else. What can I do for you? Let's look at another one. I'll just read this one to you. This is a prayer to the Sumerian god Na'ana. It sounds like an excerpt from a Game of Thrones screenplay, but it's legit. I'll pick up about halfway through the opening section. Father Na'ana, Lord of hero of the gods, who is in heaven and earth, exalted in his uniqueness. Good line. Father Na'ana, Lord of Eshe-Gargal, hero of the gods, who in heaven and earth is exalted in his uniqueness, who is grandly perfected in kingship, who solemnly advances in garments of princeliness, who is a ferocious bull, whose horn is thick, whose legs are perfected. Do you see what's wrong with your prayers? You never mention the legs. And frankly, I think God's probably annoyed about it. Right? God's up there in heaven, he never misses leg day. And he'd like you to notice once in a while. We never say that to Jesus, do we? I mean, no, please don't be offended by this, but when you were saying your prayers in the chapel when you were a kid, you were there and you were praying to Jesus about something, and you were looking up at the crucifix. Did you ever mention the abs? Like, Jesus, I need help with my driving test. It's coming up. I know you died for my sin and it's great. By the way, killer abs. It can't hurt to mention it, can it? Why not? This is a thing that is almost universally present in all of the historical prayers of our species. There is this continual need to flatter the gods, to say excruciatingly nice things about them, from their ability to make herbs to their abs. Why? Why is this present in all of the prayers of our species? It is because there is a wound deep in the bones of our humanity, a primal fear and anxiety. Are the gods listening? Are the gods angry? Do the gods like me? Are the gods just as indifferent to me as everyone else in my life is? And so what you see in all of these prayers, ancient and I think modern, is a base level of terror. A base assumption that the gods in fact don't like me. And so I have to twist and turn every syllable in my vocabulary to get them on my side. And they love it when I compliment their legs. And in our Christian prayers, genuine as they often are, we often hear this same babbling, this same primal assumption that God does not like me. However, if I sound sufficiently obsequious, and I use the right words with the right grovelling tone of voice, then maybe God will like me more But all of my prayers I approach with this assumption: God doesn't like me. The counsel of Jesus, however, is don't be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. So there's that Father word again. Jesus is asking his audience to remember that when they go into their bedroom and get on their knees for whatever reason, before they open their mouth, God has already said things about them, nice things. They were his opening line in this sermon. God is with you in your loserness, in your can't get it togetherness, when it all falls apart, when it doesn't work, when it goes wrong. God has already said, like 500 words ago, that he already likes you. Remember that before you open your mouth. So having spoken about how not to pray, about how bad it often is, Jesus then gives his followers a quick lesson. Jesus' lesson is quick. We might not go on and on. About how you actually should pray. He says, this then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven. You had enough of that F word yet? I think that many of the great questions of human philosophy have to do with the friendliness of the universe. And so in the ancient world, our forefathers wondered whether or not the gods were angry, and if they were, how they might be placated. In our modern world, we wonder whether or not there is any meaning in the quarks and the gluons and the cold vastness of space. And in this opening line of the quintessential Christian prayer, Jesus is asking his followers to affirm something of their worldview. He's asking his followers to affirm that there is something more to life. There is a beyond. When you pay your bills and you walk your dog and you do your job, it's easy to get lost in the material and lose sense of the spiritual. It's easy to forget that life is amazing, really amazing, and is connected to something bigger than ourselves. And that something in the Christian worldview isn't angry. It's friendly. It's kind. It's generous. It is our Father. Our Father. And if our view of God is anything other than a Father who is kind and generous and for us, then our view of God has got broken somewhere along the way and needs to be healed. And you'll notice, I hope you'll notice, the absence of fancy language. I understand every word in that sentence. Which, if the whole Father thing is true, kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I'd be annoyed if any of my children ever came up to me and said, "O thou great and knowing progenitor of the MacLeans, would thou kindly bestowest upon us some currency?" That we may at the dollar store some bounty procure. If someone loves you, they don't want you to jump through hoops for them. They just want you to accept the fact that they love you. They don't want you to waste a single minute of your life wondering about how much you love them. They just want you to accept it and enjoy it. And that's there in this sentence. He's your Father. He loves you. What the hell are you talking like that for? Why are you being so weird? So when you pray, just say Father. No need to mention the legs. No need to mention the herbs. And notice he says that our Father is in heaven. when he uses the word heaven here, he doesn't mean heaven as in its geography, but heaven as in the political location of God our Father. In other words, he means heaven as in the center of the universe, heaven as in the place where things happen, heaven as in the place where the ability of God to intervene in our worries and anxieties intersects with the love that God has for us. His point being then, when you open your mouth and say your prayers, have at the back of your head a feeling that not only does God know about what you're going through, he's able to help as well. Which of course raises too many questions. Perhaps you remember when your children were young, they thought more of you than they do now. Remember those days when they were certain you knew everything and could fix anything and could afford everything. And that is kind of what the Bible says about God. You know, it says that God is able to do anything that you can ask and seek and even imagine. And I have a huge imagination. And so from a faith perspective, the way for us to respond to this prayer is to ask, hey, what's keeping you up at night? Like, why did you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning? What's your biggest stress right now? What's your biggest worry right now? The opening line of this prayer asks and answers the question that we're often too afraid to. Is there anybody out there? Yes, there is. Is there somebody watching over me who's nice, who's kind? Yes, there is. Is there a God in heaven who knows me, who cares about me, who's able to help me? Yes, there is. And he's your Father. And then he says, that's great, I'm good. But then he says a bunch of stuff I'm not really interested in. Like, hallowed be your name, and whatever. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Like, yeah, okay. Can we skip to the next sentence? For me to make the effort to go into my bedroom and get down on my knees and say my prayers, it usually means something's wrong that I need to get fixed, or something's happened that I need to get off my chest. Like, I need a job, or my child is sick, or my relationships are a mess. And this particular sentence doesn't speak to any of my concerns whatsoever. I don't really care about this hallowed be your name, kingdom come, will be done stuff. Which of course is exactly why it's there. And exactly why it needs to be there. Follow the logic. If God is your Father, then that means you are his child. And like any child, you have needs. And the dangerous thing about you talking about your needs is that talk often presupposes that you know what you need. And this sentence would suggest that's not always true. Sometimes what you really need is completely different from the thing you really need. Maybe that thing that woke you up at 3 o'clock this morning in anxiety, maybe there's something else you should be worried about. You're worrying about the wrong thing. Your felt needs, your actual needs are different often. And I think that's why this sentence is here. It talks about you have a need to make God's name holy. I guess that's talking about morality in some way. So Jesus wants to include that. You ask God to help you be moral. That's a need you have. You have a need to seek God's will here on earth. I don't know, maybe that's, something big like world peace, or something little like just accepting your lot in life. Like just looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, right now, right here, this is where I am, this is who I am, and I accept that. I'm not going to defer life and happiness to something round the corner or some event that I hope is going to happen in a year's time. Grant me the peace to accept the things I can't change and the courage to change the things I can. I would never think of praying anything like that. I would never think of saying, God, help me be moral. Help me to accept things. Help me to welcome my lot in life and be okay with it. That would never enter my imagination. Because I'm always needing things. And the things I'm always needing aren't the things I'm always needing. So there's this prayer. And it's about big things like God in heaven and morality and the stoic acceptance of your lot in life. But it's also about the little things. Do you notice that? Give us today our daily bread. Nice. You can't get more basic than that. I was in a bakery before I came to church this morning. And I saw the old ladies come in and they touch all the bread and then pick one up and bang that yellow stuff that they put on it. Like 25% of you know what I'm talking about. And it's so trivial, it's so ordinary, but it's there and I love it. So there's the little things. God is in the big beyond, God is in the little things. And then there's this, forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. Now, interesting fact for you, this prayer is 57 words long in Greek. I don't know what it is in English, but in its original language it's 57 words long. That's about the same number of words as you probably spoke ordering your coffee in Tim Hortons this morning. And in just 57 short words, it covers it all. There's the big spiritual issues like God and morality. Then he gets into accepting your lot in life. Then he gets into this, I know you need to put bread on your table and get another deal. And then he gets into the business of the hurts and the angers that you're carrying around in your life today. It's all here. And then he says, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. It's like the final line in the prayer. It's great. God help me be a good person. Get me another deal and please help me stay out of trouble today. It's magic. 57 words. That's like 2 tweets. Very simple. No strange words, no strange expressions, no weirdo language, nothing obscure whatsoever, actually. It's just, God, I realize that you're important. Please give me what I need to help me make it in this world. Forgive me for the wrong I do. Help me forgive others for the wrong they've done me. And oh yeah, help me stay out of trouble today. That would be awesome. Thanks very much. I'm done. Doesn't it annoy you that the church took that simplicity and made it really complicated? I did a program when I was, I think, 19. And it was all about how you can be a better Christian than everyone else, basically. And the prayer bit of that was like, like reading your Bible for an hour and praying for an hour a day. And I did it. And it made me nasty, not good. It made me feel guilty, not accepted. It had a negative effect, not a positive effect. How do you take something so simple and so beautiful and turn it into whatever it is you've heard? And then Jesus adds a by the way. He says in verse 14, like he's done, he's given his lesson, his audience are walking out the door, he's like, oh, one more thing. If you forgive, don't like the word if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. Awesome. But if you don't forgive other people their sins, your Father won't forgive your sins. So of all the things he's just mentioned in this prayer, big things and small things, this one issue about forgiveness gets singled out underlined and repeated. And when you read this sentence, it sounds really ugly. It sounds almost like a transaction. If you don't do A, God won't do B. Which of course would make forgiveness and all that rather conditional upon our behaviour, not upon God's generosity, which doesn't fit in with the rest of the gospel. So what's the nature of this statement? Why is Jesus saying this? He's just said something beautiful. Why does he say something ugly? Why end it like that? Let me try to explain why by showing you a picture of a whale. Do you understand now? You know, whales have that hole thingy.
Blowhole.
No, it's called a hole thingy. Do you know whales have that blowhole? Thanks, Mr. Attenborough.
You're welcome.
Have that blowhole on the top of their head. Is it called a head? Okay, on the top of their head. And they breathe air through it. Now, when a whale breathes, just like when you breathe, there's two things going on at the same time. When it breathes out, bad air is being expelled. And when it breathes in, good, life-giving air is being inhaled. The good and the bad go in and out through the same hole. Maybe that's kind of what Jesus is driving at here. Maybe he's saying that the love of God that flows to you through the hole of forgiveness, through that same hole, forgiveness to others must flow. And if you block that hole up, then you're blocked up. You're just blocked up. The bad's not going out. The good's not coming in. You're just blocked. You're just angry. You're just hurt. You're just bitter. And it wasn't your fault 5 years ago. They did it. They said it. They caused it. Nothing. That was then. It wasn't your fault. But it's your fault that you're blocked. It's your fault the bad's not going out. And it's stopping the good going in. I think that's what Jesus means here. Loving God and not loving others doesn't work. You either open yourself up to goodness or you close yourself off from it. Take your pick. And maybe opening yourself up to goodness and closing yourself from it, maybe that's the very thing we ought to think about when we get on our knees and pray. There's a good God. He wants to pour his goodness into our lives. Why be bunged up? Can bunged up be the final word of a sermon? I think it can. Any questions? Oh no, there's none. It's 11:30. Thank you. It is 11:30. We've got to go. Thank you for coming. God bless you. See you next week.